All right, welcome to the show. I am your host, James Ellers. This is the Forward United podcast. Today we are joined by Rashad Lloyd. Rashad is running for Congress in Maryland, in the 5th District of Maryland. So, Rashad, thank you for being here, and why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Well, first of all, James, thank you for having me.
Yeah.
And let's see. Starting about myself, I had to be insane to run for Congress. Trust me, this was not the plan at all. But it really came to fruition after watching Andrew Yang's campaign because it just inspired me so much. I turned around. Last year was a rough year for me. I had probably one of the worst years I've ever had in the 28 that I've been alive. I had unchecked mental illness that finally came to a head. I ended up quitting my job. I was so stressed. There was so much pressure. There were two major deaths in my family last year that kind of rocked us back to back. One was my uncle. He died a week after my birthday in November. And then in February, it was my youngest niece who died in a car accident on Route 301. And that accident claimed the life of like 5 children, 1 adult. It was a drunk driving accident. So that, along with, my financial stress, my work stress, my personal stress, watching my grandmother's health failing. She ended up going into the hospital. She just flat out lost her ability to walk. Wow. My mother became her primary caregiver, and she's a small business owner. And just watching all of that happen, put so much stress on me that I remember just, for months and months and months, it probably had to be 8, 9 months to a year. I would end up going to bed. I would end up having panic attacks for 3 hours after I laid down. I'd get probably 2, 3 hours of solid sleep. Right. Wake up in the morning, have another 2 hour spread of panic attacks, and it just got to be too much. I turned around. I had to quit my job because it got to the point where I was like, man, if I don't find a way to relieve some of this pressure immediately, I feel like I'm going to end up killing myself. I was like, it's just so much shit piled up on top of each other. And then, ended up quitting my job. I had a horrible summer. I was in the deepest, darkest depression I'd ever had. And then I turned around and, I've always been one to have my eye on civics and politics. I like learning about how the system works. I like having, a say. I always exercise my right to vote. Ever since I turned 18, I would always vote. So, despite the fact that I was in this depression, I definitely turned around and tuned into the first Democratic debate that NBC and MSNBC did. And I really tuned in because I saw that Andrew Yang made the debate stage. Now, the first time I had heard about him, it was probably October 2018. Okay. Came across a Facebook ad,
really?
The Asian man giving away $1,000 a month. And I was like, wow, what an insane joke. I can't believe that this guy's running for president.
Yeah.
But you know what? I was excited to see him get on a debate stage. And I was like, you know what? I'm ready to hear what the man has to say. So tuned in, watched the whole debate, and I was like stunned because I saw how the moderators purposefully ignored his presence. Now, again, I've watched presidential debate after presidential debate, Democrats, Republicans, it didn't matter. I watched all of them, and I've never seen a candidate shut out like Andrew Yang was.
Yep.
And I was like, that's insane. So you know what? It actually inspired me to take a look at his platform on his website. I was like, you know what? I really want to hear what the man has to say. I want to see what this $1,000 is about. So I checked out his website, and man, was I surprised to see that he had, at that time, about 130 policy proposals on his website.
Right. Yep.
So I spent like 2 days tearing through each and every one of them because I was just desperate to see, what he was really about. And as I started reading more and more of them, I was looking to see if I really disagreed with what he was trying to sell the American people at its core. I've never had a presidential candidate where I was like, no, it's not that I agree with the method, the ways that he's doing it 100%, but I agreed with the fact that everything he was doing was about improving the life of the average American.
Right.
And that's why I was like, wow, you know what? This guy's legit.
Yeah.
And after that, it like really sparked something in my head, and I began to actually like hope again, like
Yeah.
legitimately have hope for the future, because that's what I had lost. That's where a lot of my despair came from, because I as an individual didn't see a path forward from
Right.
where I was until I really started looking at his vision for the country. And from there, you know, down the rabbit hole, you hear the story with a lot of Yang Gang, it's kind of the same. But with me, I turned around and looked at it and I said, you know what, with everything that I know about, you know, politics in America, his policy proposals are going to get nowhere in Congress unless he has people to support him.
Yeah.
So I was like, what can I do? And as an individual with no job, no money, I couldn't donate to the campaign. So I was like, what contribution can I make?
Right.
And I started doing research in my district, realized that Steny Hoyer, the House Majority Leader, had been in office for 38 years. He had got especially elected in 1981. So he's been in office 10 years longer than I've been alive.
Wow.
So that man's been my rep, you know, basically my entire life.
Yeah, that's crazy.
My entire life. And I was like, wow, you know what? If I can find somebody to run in this district that knows Andrew Yang's policy proposals, if we can find people to run across this country, he'll have a good chance of actually getting his proposals through Congress. Because you got to think about it. And I thought about it this way. Remember when Barack Obama got elected? He walked into office with a supermajority. He had the House, he had the Congress, the House, the Senate, the White House. And it still took him 2 years to get the ACA to his desk.
Yeah.
And that's when he had all of his allies, with the Senate being Republican controlled and a lot of the, you know, corporate Dems not really interested in policy proposals like Andrew Yang's. I was like, wow, his proposals are going to go nowhere. So, you know, I reached out to everybody I could think to, Twitter, Reddit. I was talking to people in the streets, and I was like, hey, you know, the people who I knew were civically engaged. I was like, you ever thought about running for Congress? And everybody was like, what, insane? Exactly. Of course not. I'm not doing that. Mm-hmm. So it got to the point where I realized that I was not going to be able to find a champion. I was going to have to champion these things myself.
Right.
But then I turned around and, you know, as I kept engaging with people, I really wanted to find out why they were politically disengaged.
Right.
And a lot of it came down to the fact that, you know, politicians always come into the communities. If they come into the communities, they bring you these promises of a better life. They say, hey, if you donate to my campaign, if you give me the money that you have so that I can get in office, I'll make sure to take care of you. They always come with the resources, but then when they achieve their goal, they get in office, the resources automatically just disappear.
Yep.
You never get the return on investment. Right. And, you know, a lot of people were like, I don't donate because it's a waste of my money. I don't pay attention to anyone who comes to me with their hand out. So I realized there I was going to have a rough time doing fundraising. Right. So with the fundraising aspect, and then me realizing that I was broke, and I had felt at one point I didn't have anything to offer, I realized that I don't believe that money belongs in politics. The only reason that money's involved in politics is to keep the poorest of us excluded from the conversation. So with that in mind, I was like, you know what? I'm going to try the insane task of running my campaign with $0. I don't want to take anything from anyone. And I realized I wouldn't be able to push a ton of policy proposals. But I was also trying to figure out a way that the average American can hold their congressional representative to account. Trying to figure out how to build a system of bottom-up accountability. And that's when I came across a 21st century form of democracy. It's a liquid democracy. It's a hybrid between a representative democracy, what we have now, where we elect our representatives for the House every 2 years, the Senate every 6 years, and a direct democracy where everybody gets to vote on every issue in Congress. So with a liquid democracy, at any point in time, you could take back your legislative authority and vote on issues directly. Like, for example, one of my favorite ones to use generally clicks with everybody's head immediately. You know, the Patriot Act was just reauthorized, a couple of months ago? Mm-hmm. I don't know a single human being who likes living in a police state.
Exactly.
At all.
Yep.
But you know what? Steny Hoyer turned around and he was like, yep, I'm absolutely going to reauthorize the Patriot Act, despite the fact that I know at least a dozen people, including myself, who called his office and was like, man, you got to stop this. Like, they're getting kind of sick of this. He didn't want to hear it, you know? So I was like, if I can run a campaign on $0 with the only thing that I'm offering as a chief policy is to put power back in the hands of the everyday person, I believe that I can be successful. Steny Hoyer's been holding on to that seat for so long, you know, like a king, essentially. That's basically what he's been. And I'm like, if I can bring some fresh ideas, if I can put power back into the hands of the people, I actually have a chance of being successful, even as an independent candidate. And I didn't want to run as a Democrat or Republican because, to be honest with you, neither one of those parties' ideals really align with my ideals. And I was like, you know what? All I need to do is find enough people to sign a petition. I can get on the ballot. We can get these ideas out there and see if the people are really ready to take control of their own destinies.
That's awesome. So you can actually, because every state is different, so you can actually get on the ballot in Maryland with just signatures.
Oh, yeah.
Really?
Oh, yeah.
Because out here, well, maybe it's different for independent, because out here, just to do the bare minimum to get on the ballot for Congress and as a Democrat, you have to get like a minimum of like 50 or 60 signatures and pay $1,800 as a filing fee, which is crazy just to get on the ballot. You know what I mean? So that's interesting. So, and then to go back to the idea of a liquid democracy. Now that's a hybrid version of where you have the representative, their vote carries so much weight, and then the people actually giving their votes directly carries so much weight, right? Can you explain the liquid democracy a little more?
Yeah. So I actually use a little scenario when I really want to explain it for people who like to really chew on the idea a little more. Say you have an extremely small constituency of 100 people.
Yeah.
Say there's a proposal that goes up to tear down the local community park and build high-rise condominiums.
Right.
So the representative has already signaled his intent to upvote the bill. He's like, yes, I feel like this will be good for the community. Here's how the scenario would work in this example. Out of 100 people, 70 of them automatically are like, hey, you know what? We feel very strongly about this issue. We want to take back our legislative authority. We want to vote on this issue directly.
Right.
30 people turn around and say, hey, you know what? We elected this representative. We trust what they're going to do. Doesn't really matter which way it goes for us.
Right.
So out of the 70 people who've taken back their legislative authority, 10 of them are like, hey, you know what? We want these new condominiums. We think they're a great idea. We think they'll help revitalize the community. But on the other hand, 60 people are like, hey, you know what? We love this local park that we have. We want to keep it. So then they vote no. So the votes get tallied up, yeses versus noes. You have 60 noes, and then you have 40 yeses. You have 10 from people who took back the right to vote themselves, and then you have the 30 that the representative has because people did not take back their authority. And then it's just simple majority rule. That way, the representative is always held accountable to their actual constituents' will. They can no longer just go off the rails and do as they please because they're in office. Because right now, you have to realize there's not even a way to recall a federal legislator. It's impossible. Once they get in office, they're in office for their term, unless basically they resign.
Right. That's crazy. Yeah, we need to, I mean, especially after the Iowa caucuses, like it's very apparent that we need updates to our systems. And yeah, that's a very smart one. So, so in the past, obviously a lot of people are struggling. Obviously we all struggle in our own ways. So before, in the past leading up to this election, like obviously you saw Andrew Yang that got you engaged this time, but prior to that, were you politically engaged, or was it something, because you sound like you know a lot about it. So were you politically engaged before Andrew Yang?
Oh, yeah, definitely. I can't tell you when I really got politically engaged, because I'm pretty sure it was before I was 18. But let me tell you what, as soon as I turned 18, I was adamant about voting in every federal election that I
Good.
could.
That's awesome.
Now, I think I might have missed one midterm election since I've been 18, but other than that, nothing. I just always was like, no, if I have this power, I want to exercise it because I want to make sure there are people who are actually looking out for me, who are my representatives, who are my
Right.
presidents. So yeah, I've definitely always been civically engaged in that mind. But you know what? Honestly, I think I jumped on the bandwagon too late. Coming up in PG County public school system, I realized a fault uh, in the system when I got older, and it's that they don't teach us enough about civics in
Right.
school.
Yep.
And it's like one of those things you have to figure out. I know it's seared into my skull that the mitochondria is the powerhouse of the cell. But let me tell you what I didn't learn. I didn't learn anything about my taxes. I didn't learn how to
Yep.
balance a checkbook. And I didn't
Yep.
really learn anything about government and how it functions. Because if you understand how the government works, you would really know that you as an individual and the people around you really have the power to move this giant beast in the direction that you want it to go in, not the
Right.
direction that your representatives or your president wants it to go in. It's all about the people, but a lot of people don't understand that because they don't teach it to us in school.
Right.
I really believe that every school should have an elected student body that actually has, one, authority in how the curriculum actually goes, because people who are being taught know exactly what they need, even more so than the people who are teaching them.
Right.
Now, I'm not talking about, wild things like letting kids say, hey, you know what, let's have recess all day. But let's be honest, when I was in high school, a lot of the classes I took were a gigantic waste of time for me. And if I
Yeah.
had a little more control over my schedule, over my curriculum, I would have had a better path in life. Right now, I feel like a lot of public schools are just churning people out, giving them, just enough information to get out there through standardized testing and be
Right.
a cog in the machine.
Yep, exactly. I mean, you're spot on with that, and that's something that is an issue not only in grade school but college as well. College right now is just like, hey, yeah, come in, you'll get a degree, you'll get a job, it's going to be great, and then you get through and you're like, that's not even close to true. So what if because it is a little difficult to gauge, like, have people while they're in it know what is better for them. So what if we put in place like a mandatory 5-year, 10-year survey saying, hey, 10 years, 5 years, 10 years after you graduate, what should we have changed? What should we do differently? You know what I mean? Because I think about that right now. Like, if I could, hindsight's 2020, right? So looking back on it, it's a lot easier to see what would have helped you versus being actually in it. So I completely agree that we need something that actually holds these institutions accountable for, like, hey, we need you to actually teach us relevant information. So that's smart. That's something I didn't think about till right now.
That's a fair point. And you know what? One of the things that I always tell people when I'm trying to do engagements on the ground is, and it's always, hey, do you know who should be the Secretary of Education? We should have a dissatisfied student be the Secretary of Education, because they would be someone who turns around and is like, hey, you know what? I came up through a system that was not built to
Right.
cater to my needs, to help me on my path to greater education. And they would have fantastic insight. They would be invested in making sure that the next generation had a better path forward than they got.
Yeah, that's smart. That's super smart. Especially, I mean, grade school and college. I mean, you talk to a college graduate today, and I think underemployment for college graduates is at 40%. So one of them, you graduate from college and you're going to work at Subway with all the student debt. I think they would change the system drastically. So, so you've been fairly politically engaged over the past year. You went from, depression, I mean, dealing with a lot of things, to now you're actively engaged, and to the point where you're not just actively engaged, you're actually running for office, which is huge. So, I mean, and you said there's a lot of emphasis on people, right? So what is your opinion, like, on a scale of 1 to 10, how would you rate the treatment of individuals in our society today?
3.
Yeah, it's probably
3
accurate.
out of 10.
Yep. And why do you give it a 3?
So I've really, after I ended up quit my job and going through all that stuff, I got to
Right.
see how the social safety nets were really built.
Right.
And from personal experience and living it right now, they are not built to support you when you fall. They are basically made in such a way where it's incredibly hard to get them, and they're built to keep you down because anytime you start to build yourself up a little bit, they take what you
Right.
have from you. Just a short example, when I finally turned around and tried to apply for SNAP benefits,
Right.
and we all know, it's pretty common sense. If you don't have any income, you kind of need to eat or you die.
Right.
It's
Exactly.
simple.
Yep.
I filled in the application. Since I had zero income, they approved it immediately. And then they said, hey, you know what? We'll let you know when we need you to come in for a in-person interview at the Department of Health and Human Services, just so we can, verify your identity, ask you a couple questions, et cetera, et cetera. So I got that notice, and you know what? A week later, I started to get a little antsy because I hadn't heard anything yet. So I turned around, called the office, put on as much charm as I could over the phone, and I was like, "Hey,
Right.
can you tell me what's going on here? Because I haven't heard anything back." The young lady was like, "Oh, no problem, baby. Let me check and see what I can find for you." And she found that I had and this was a Monday. I called. She said, "Hey, you have an interview upcoming this Friday, 10 a.m., the Hyattsville office." I said, "Okay, perfect. Thank you. Can you tell me what I need to bring? ID, social security card, birth certificate." Perfect. And then before we disconnected, I asked one more question. I said, "Hey, when was I going to find out this information?" And you know what? She was like, "Hey, we send out letters and they get to people when they get to people."
That's crazy.
Whoa, that's wild.
Yeah.
So take a look at this. I go in Friday, everything's perfectly fine. Get the stamp, get approved. Saturday morning, I go outside, get the mail. There's the letter from DHS. I open it. The letter saying, "Hey, you need to report to DHS Friday at 10 a.m." And I'm like, if I hadn't called, they would have denied me because I missed my interview.
That's crazy.
And I'm like, that's wild. And the worst part about that is there were 2 sheets of paper in that one envelope. I actually got somebody else's letter for their interview, and I still have it to this day because it's one of the strongest physical pieces of evidence I have of the flaws in the system. It's just not efficient enough for people who are struggling. And you know what? I experienced kind of the same thing with Medicaid. With Medicaid, you don't have health insurance in America, you die.
Yeah.
It's massively, healthcare is massively expensive in America. And with that one, same thing. I got approved immediately, didn't have any income, turned around. They said, "Hey, we're going to send you a packet 15 to 30 days. 30 days later, I called back and I was like, "Hey, where's my packet?" Mind you, I desperately needed Medicaid in the beginning because I needed to find a therapist and a psychologist because I needed to get my mental health in order because that's a giant part of the reason why I had to leave the workforce because I was just so massively bogged down by that unchecked at the time mental illness, undiagnosed all my life. I had no idea until I was actually able to go in and see a therapist and see a psychiatrist that I had major depressive disorder, that I had ADHD, that I had anxiety disorder. Like those 3 things I found out only after I got help. And, I called Maryland Health Connect. I said, "Hey, you know what? I was expecting this packet. What's going on?" Same thing as with the SNAP benefits. Had to put a little charm on. I was like, "Hey, can you help me out here?" And you know what? Again, the lady over the phone was like, "No problem." She pulled my file and she said, "Hey, you know what? You're missing one form that hasn't been filled out." And I was like, "Oh, okay, great. Let me know what it is. I'll knock it out immediately. Sorry, I missed it," which is kind of odd on my part because, I was in retail management for years. So attention to detail was a necessary part of my job. And I was like, "So what could I have been missing?" And she said, "Since you put down that you had zero income, we need you to fill out an affidavit of no income." Now, I was like, "Sure. What information do I need?" She was like, "Here, I'll give you the link to the form." I looked at it. I literally had to put my first and last name in the blank space up here. I had to sign and date it at the bottom. And it said, "I affirm under the penalty of perjury, then I am making no income. And that was the one piece of paper that was holding up my medical care. And I was like, wow. So I asked again, I said, hey, was anybody going to tell me that this was the holdup? Was anybody going to notify me that my Medicaid was being withheld because I didn't have that form? And she flat out was like, no.
God. So she's completely desensitized to it too. She's just, yeah.
And it's like, wow, these are things that people need to survive. These are systems that are built that we pay for out of our taxes. And mind you, as somebody who had started work when I was in high school, 10 years of me faithfully paying my taxes, and I was being, run through loops trying to get systems that I funded for people in situations like me. And I was like, oh, this is unacceptable.
Yeah. And it's crazy because, I mean, imagine how many people are trying to do the same things because they need help and they're running into issues like that. Like, hey, I don't make any money. Okay, cool. Here, fill out this packet. By the way, we're not going to tell you, but you need to fill out these extra forms that'll probably disqualify you. Like, there's so much, not only inefficiency in the system, it's just laziness to the point. And like you, a lot of the like I'm running for Congress too, and a lot of it's due to the same, a lot of frustrations in the systems because it's almost easier to run like you almost have to run for Congress. Like you have to get in office and fix it that way versus trying to talk to their manager. You know what I mean? Like if you try to fix these things and bring it to their attention the way you're supposed to, or they want you to, it'll never get done. Like we literally have to run for office, get in there and fix it that way versus the way it is right now, because the status quo right now is it's just not working. So, so you're rating for, how well do you think people are treated in our society is a 3. So what do you think is the best way for us to improve that?
So one, we have to look at how we got here. It's not that I think that the people who work in these social service offices don't necessarily want to help people with these benefits. Why are these programs understaffed? Why do we have such severe mean testing for things that people pay into their entire lives until they need them? We need to look at things like universal basic income.
Right.
So people actually have a floor in this system. That's why I really got drawn into Andrew Yang's freedom dividend, $1,000 a month. Means testing, it's paid through taxing our giant corporations who basically don't pay any taxes as it is. Fun fact, when I looked up the 2018 revenue from the Congressional Budget Office, I looked at their actual report. Individuals paid $1.3 trillion in payroll taxes, $1.7 trillion in income taxes, and then we had $205 billion in corporate taxes. And it's like, how exactly did we end up paying more in taxes collectively than the people we actually work for? It's insane. And then we also need things like Medicare for all. And I can tell you why, because as someone on Medicaid right now, just 2 weeks ago, I ended up having to go to my primary care physician because my asthma was actually starting to act up. It happens few and far in between. Right. But you know what? She prescribed me an inhaler and a spacer, 2 things, just so I could breathe easy.
Right.
And when I went to the pharmacy to pay for it, they hadn't ran my Medicaid through, and it came up to $93. And I was like, shit, man, $93. I'm just trying to breathe here.
Right, yeah, exactly.
And I'm like, if I didn't have that Medicaid to back me, I only had $10 in cash in my pocket. I would have had to turn around and be like, hey, I have to leave this stuff here. And I would have had to continue struggling the way I was struggling. No one should ever be worried about getting the medicine they need. No one should ever end up in fear for their life because they can't have their medical needs met in the richest country in the world. It makes no sense.
Exactly.
So those are the things, those are at least two core things that we really need to fix in this country. And it's just about putting people above the profits of these giant corporations.
Right. Yeah, and that's it's kind of crazy how, far away from that core idea, right? I mean, the idea, like, government was created to, advocate for the people. Corporations were made to help people work better, more efficiently, to assist people. And somewhere in the last, 30, 40 years, it's probably around where they were deregulating a lot in the early 90s, but it's gotten flipped. And I completely agree. Like the humanity first, just mantra that a lot of us go by, like just applying that to everything we do, will make a huge difference. And UBI, universal basic income, paired with Medicare for all, because Medicare for all isn't really something that a lot of the people in Yang Gang really talk about. But if you've had issues like that, like you're saying with you, and then I have kids that are 3 and 5, so it's similar thing. Like, it's just like, hey, how the hell do I make sure they always have insurance? And like you said, like if you're struggling and you have to get Medicaid, then you have a little coverage there. If you start earning a little money, then it gets taken away even before you might be able to get coverage elsewhere. Like there's just gaps everywhere in our society for the less fortunate, you know what I mean, where it should. And then there's a lot of advantages for huge corporations. So I completely agree with everything you said. And one of the core things, one of the core beliefs that is tied to universal basic income is, in a modern society, the advantages that we're able to give, in a society, go to the less fortunate first. And then whatever's left over after that goes to, the well-off. So just like you said, a perfect example of this, in the last year is corporate tax cuts and food stamps. Why are we giving billion-dollar companies tax cuts when we can't afford food stamps and Social Security is getting cut? So I'm on the same page completely. And again, a lot of the things we're looking at, just for the people listening, is when you run for office, and if you're politically engaged more than you have been in the past, I definitely encourage you running for office. You have to look at things a lot more in depth than you would just being politically engaged. So universal basic income, absolutely. Go ahead.
When you said you have to look at things a lot more closely, I just wanted to let people know one of the best resources you could ever tap into that no one thinks to look at. If you just go to the Congressional Budget Office's website, they have all of the reports that they provide our elected representatives. And then you can actually have all the information that your representatives in Congress have right on your computer. And one of the wildest things that I ever saw is, the effective corporate tax rate. Just as a perfect example, Blizzard, the gaming company, in 2018, they actually got $135 million rebate. So I want you to think about it this way. That means that we paid taxes, and our tax money actually went straight to corporations who paid no taxes, and then actually got our money instead. It's insane.
Yeah, that's completely backwards. And I think, I don't know. And that, see, I'm at a loss for words, just because it's from a standpoint of, okay, what do I do to change this from the ground level? And it's like, there's very, I feel like the system's built out so that, they make it so they want you to feel discouraged. You know what I mean? Yep. Just so, they want you to feel that way so that you don't, act against them, or you don't go against the system. And another thing, again, running for office, a lot of things are brought to light where it makes you sound like a conspiracy theorist. No, what I just said, it kind of sounds like that, but literally, the system's built to run for office so that it advantages the establishment and people with money. And the same goes for a lot of different things in society. Like, it makes you sound kind of crazy, but it's true. So we've talked about, we've talked about a lot of different problems. So what is something else, that you would consider a major problem in our society that we need to try to solve?
So I actually and it just popped into my head. I'm really glad that you asked me that question because it's just some information I pulled yesterday from the FEC's website from January 2019, January 1st, 2019 to January 31st of 2020. We as a country, as people, corporations, all of it, spent $2.2 billion on federal elections.
Oh my God.
That's the amount of money that was in politics. And the wild part is that was about $2 or $3 billion. No, not billion. $2 or $3 million less than Greenland's entire GDP.
That's insane. And
we are spending the GDP of smaller countries on our elections. And it's one of the things it's one of the reasons it drove me to run without taking any money, because I find it just absolutely immoral. Like, I've seen the software that they offer politicians. I get emails for it constantly. It's like, hey, you give us X amount of money and we'll sell you your voters' data. And I'm like, whoa, are those people making any money from this? Where did you even get their data from in the first place? And it's I've seen it. It's insane. It's wild.
It's and they're trying to take advantage of it, because I get the same emails. So just for an example, and this is just information for people, if you're looking at running for office, or if you're just considering it, this will be good advice. So I had one of those people contact me. They said, hey, we have information for 30,000 voters in your district. We can sell you that information for $1,200. And I was actually like, damn, I'm going to need like emails and stuff to send out email blasts or text messages blasts, whatever. So I wasn't like considering, but it was just like, it'd be nice to have. But down the road, I found out, and I think it has to be similar in different areas. So in California, you can actually go to the registrars of voters office in your county. So you go to the registrar of voter office. You say, hey, I need a voter list. So for my entire district, so I got about 250,000. And this is just name, address, phone number. It's just it's not like their, Facebook ID. It's nothing like super personal. It's just with voter stuff. So to get 250,000 names, just info, it costs $80 versus someone selling it. So these companies are literally going to counties. They're buying those lists and reselling those lists for pennies on the dollar, and they're just reselling. So there are things like that in our society. Like you said, elections have so much money spent on them because of things like that. The elections aren't being run efficiently just because they have so much money to throw at it. They just, pocket most of the money, get it done as cheaply as possible, and just run with it that way. A good example of that is that shadow app they used in Iowa. I don't know. I don't know off the top of my head the amount of money they spent on it, but
shit show.
Exactly. So like, you can easily make an app a lot more efficient than that for way cheaper than they spend on it. But here's the thing: they're just so inefficient with what they do that they don't care. They just want something to give a product as a result. So this is where I feel like smart people need to get in and start running for office. That just having smart people in office will knock down those numbers drastically, because those companies are coming to us saying, hey, spend $1,200 on 30,000 names when I got 250,000 names for $80. You know what I mean? Like, that is $1,100 saved right there just from me doing a little research. You know what I mean?
Yep.
And this can be applied to every part of your campaign. And that's not the end all be all. Obviously, we need to get corporate money out of elections. And yeah, I completely agree that's it's just money that is just wasted that can be going to better things, because those numbers are going to keep going up throughout this year. Like, you imagine how much Bloomberg is spending right now, and then how much Trump is spending. Like,
I think the RNC had a record fundraising quarter at 65 million.
it's insane.
And I'm like, wow. If I pull together the money that my parents have made throughout their life, the money that I'll make throughout my life, and any children, if I'm blessed enough to have them make throughout their life, I won't even hit 65 million.
Yeah, exactly. And that money's being spent, like, Bloomberg's going around putting up billboards trying to talk smack on Donald Trump. Like, this needs to be spent in better ways than just spinning your wheels, because Bloomberg's spending money and he's not getting anywhere. Like, you show up to a debate and do that horribly, like, you're not getting anywhere. Like, I saw a number today. His net favorability dropped by 20 points after that debate. Like, you have billions of dollars and you're not going anywhere. So back to the, the core what we were talking about. So what do you think we could do to help solve that problem?
So one, we really have to focus on looking at our candidates in depth and what they really have to offer. We've got to get out of this vote blue no matter who mindset,
Right.
because it's really detrimental to, our progress as a nation if we keep electing the same people over and over and over again. And it's not just Steny Hoyer. You've got to take a look at people like Nancy Pelosi, who's been in office for a decade, Maxine Waters. And I know everybody on social media loves Auntie Maxine, but you know what? You got to think about it. You cannot hold on to these seats of power for that long. Even Bernie Sanders, the people's champion, and for all intents and purposes, the front runner for the Democratic nomination, has been in office for 40 years. How long has he been holding those seats? How many new ideas have been stifled because these people hold on to these seats? Joe Biden's another perfect example of someone who he likes to really be proud of the fact that he got elected when he was 29, and here he is, 70 something years old, almost 50 years later. He's still in Washington, D.C. with his hand, moving pieces around the board. And it's like, that's insane. We've got to start looking at 21st century solutions for running elections. We've got to. It's critical that we start having a conversation around term limits. And you know what? I'll give credit where credit is due. Ted Cruz turned around and he put out his plan for a constitutional amendment to add in term limits, and I supported 100%, because you should not be able to stay in office for an unlimited amount of time. And then we also have to look at, and this may be less popular, but we really have to stop running families that stop electing families that run the country. I mean, you got to think about it. The Kennedy brat, I can't think of his name to save my life, but he's trying to get into the Senate now, so he can get
too.
Yeah, so he can get a smooth ride into the Senate. You've got to think about reps like Deborah Dingell, who went and took her husband's seat after he passed. You've got to look at elections like the special election in the 7th District of Maryland, where Elijah Cummings, the late Elijah Cummings' wife, is trying to pick up his seat. We have to end these family dynasties. You cannot do that. It just doesn't make any sense. It's, again, suppressing new ideas, and it's just keeping power within a family bloodline. That's something that we as Americans should be wary of, because, we left a monarchy, back in the day.
Exactly.
Because we wanted freedom. We can't turn around and give it away.
Yeah, I don't see that being an unpopular opinion at all. I mean, it's Look at the Bushes, same thing. Clinton's trying to do the same thing. It's just like you said. I mean, it's similar to the term limits. Like, okay, we'll put something else in, but they'll be exactly the same. So yeah, that's definitely. And then we have to. Citizens United needs to be overturned. I mean, can't just let this corporate money into Congress because, even out here, what I'm dealing with, so I'm dealing with, so there's 9 different people running for office in my district. There are 5 Republicans. There's only 3 Democrats and 1 independent. So I'm running against someone that is very vague on any policy, super vague on any policy. They haven't really stood up for anything, but they've raised $500,000 from 30 different corporations. So just the numbers, I read a news story today that was just like, hey, this person's the front runner because they raised this much money. And then there's these other people that haven't raised as much money. So they're not basing, like these news sources aren't basing information on polls. The information they're feeding their readers is only based on fundraising. Yep. You know what I mean? So I could be a horrible person, go out, raise a bunch of money, and then you just get credit just because you raise a lot of money. So, and that's the precedent. That's kind of where we're at a tipping point wise, I feel, in the election process. So we had this issue with Donald Trump. If Donald Trump didn't have all that money to help him get elected, he wouldn't even be in there. Like, he shouldn't have been in there anyway, but he wouldn't be in there. So now we're at the point where we have Bloomberg on this side. Now, Bloomberg, I don't think he'll do as well as people are thinking. I could be wrong. But let's just say hypothetically we put Bloomberg as the Democratic nominee. So the precedent is saying, hey,
you can buy the White House.
Yeah, you have to be a billionaire to buy the White House. You probably have to be a millionaire to buy congressional and Senate seats. So this is where I feel like we're at a tipping point where we can't, like, because I've been surprised how many people, I talk to just, that have similar political views, I feel like, that are like, hey, yeah, I like Bloomberg. I'm like, really? Like, I'm really surprised at that. So
yikes.
That's where I think we are. And again, Nevada's tomorrow, so we should do a live stream or something about Nevada. Like, I'll be trying to stream. Again, this episode might not be up till after Nevada, so if you're listening to this, then you'll see what happened. But Nevada, it will happen. We'll get those results, and I think it'll be Bernie. I think it'll go from there. But just the fact that Bloomberg has bought his way just into the conversation, because he doesn't have any votes cast for him right now. Like, he's not on any. He's not even
right.
He's not even on the Nevada ballot, and he went to the debate. Like, that doesn't even make sense. So, just the fact that he could influence the DNC that much just with money. Like, that's a huge issue.
With a mere $300,000.
Well, that's nothing to him. You know what I mean? Like, I heard the other day that Mike Bloomberg makes more money on interest than a year than Tom Steyer's like whole net worth. Like, Tom Steyer's net worth is like 1.6 billion, and Bloomberg makes more than that in interest in a year. Which I don't know how that's what I'm saying. Like, little things like that. Like I don't know how that's even legal. Like, you have people sleeping on the street and dying on the street, and
you have people who get hit with overdraft fees.
Yeah.
How? Anybody who gets hit with an overdraft fee cannot afford it. But then you have billionaires who make the net worth of other billionaires in interest. It's insane.
Right. Well, no, exactly. And that's why, I mean, thank you for running for Congress. And, I'm trying to do the same fight here. Is we need to get more people in office that have different views. So again, if you're listening to this, please run for office. We'll try to help you.
Absolutely. And let me tell you another fun fact that I learned from the Congressional Budget Office, looking at the demographic breakdown of the 116th Congress. 35.71% of the House of Representatives, their profession before they got to office, lawyers.
Yep.
55% of the Senate, lawyers. Yep. We let the damn country get taken over by lawyers.
Yeah, and that trend has been there for too long. So that's something we're working on. And if you're running for, if you have any interest in politics, like please run for office. We'll help you figure it out. That's something that, again, we were talking this before we started recording. That's something that we were planning on working on, is some kind of candidate accelerator to help people run for office. Right now, it looks like Andrew Yang might be building something similar, so we'll wait for his lead on that to decide where to go. But if you're just, you ask questions, you need to have questions answered, anything, you could reach out, we could figure that out. So is there anything, what's something that are you working on building something right now, or any projects you want to work on? Like what's Rashad doing right now?
Yes. So the thing I'm most excited about right now is, one, I'm really adamant about not taking any political donations. So you'll never see any advertisements. You'll never see a single paid pamphlet that I drop off at somebody's house. But what I did think about, and I was really inspired by Andrew Yang's appearance on the Joe Rogan podcast, is if I really want to get my message out to the 5th District, I need to make it tailor-made for the 5th District. Right now, Steny Hoyer doesn't do town halls. Yep. He doesn't take phone calls. He won't even debate his primary challenger, Michaela Wilkes, who's running in the race, who's also part of the UBI caucus. You should definitely check her out, despite the fact that she's an opponent of mine. It's all about getting Hoyer out of office. That's the main goal. I don't care about anything else. But you got to think about it. He refuses to interact with the public because he believes he doesn't have to. He can run on his record, and that's it. But he doesn't talk to people. So I'm actually launching a YouTube channel and a podcast myself. It's called Pivot into Politics. And the main goal of the show is to bring in common folk, regular individuals that you can find on the street, bring them in, sit them down, talk to them, and say, hey, you know what? I'm going to do something that no politician in this area is going to do for you. I'm going to sit down. I want you to tell me about your struggles, tell me about your successes, and then tell me about what you need as an individual to make your life better. And then that right there, that video will serve a couple of purposes. One, it serves as the contract between me and them. I will go to Congress to execute your will, not the will of, a corporate donor, not the will of my grassroots campaign donors. It's all about the individual. So I want to be able to spread that video around and say, hey, you know what, everybody, I'm talking to people just like you, just like me, just to find out what they need so I can make sure to get that done. And on top of that, since I'm collecting signatures, one of the key parts of that will be, since I can't travel around the whole 5th District with basically no money. But you know what? I've seen the inefficiencies in, like the canvassing software where, you pay for their names and the addresses, you go, you knock on doors, you drop off flyers. Most people don't answer their doors. If they do answer their doors, they're like, either one of two things. Mostly it's like, hey, I need you to get off my property because I want to talk to you. Or they may be like, hey, you know what? Yes, I will support you. But with a easily shareable YouTube video, a podcast, imagine how many homes I could be invited in without even having to knock on a door. And just think about it. What I intend to do is just link in the form that I need to have signed off. And I say, hey, if you believe in what we're doing, just print off this form, collect 5 signatures from people around you, take a picture of it, send it to my email. I'll come and pick up a hard copy of it when I can. And that's how we're really going to spread this message around under the radar. It's going to be one of those things where it's just like person-to-person interaction. And, I feel like people really respect the fact that I don't want their money, but I just want their stories, their problems, so I can figure out how we can fix them together. That's the thing we're working on.
That's awesome. How when are you planning on starting that podcast and YouTube channel?
So right now, it's been half struggle, half success. So one, with still no income, I was struggling to figure out how exactly to get the equipment that I need. And I actually turned around and I actually put it out on Twitter. And I was like, hey, look, this is the idea that I have, very passionate about it. And I actually reached out to anybody who would listen. And I said, hey, if you believe in this, Amazon wish list of supplies. And I was like, hey, if you can help with this, go ahead and help. And we actually have had some success. That's how I got the camera I'm talking on now, the mic I'm talking on now. I actually just got a message while we were on this podcast. And I believe I have my first guest locked in. The message turned around and said, I would be honored to be your first guest. And I'm like, yes, all I need is that story, and we can really start the fire that re-engages people. And I'm really looking to talk to not just like millennials, like my age group. This idea came from a supporter of mine who was just 16, who told me that I need to start using the tools of the 21st century to help spread the message of my campaign. She was like, you know what? It's insane that nobody is thinking, hey, why don't we put the message out on YouTube and let it be shared that way? And I was like, you know what? That makes perfect sense. Because how did my parents find out about Andrew Yang? Through me. How did I find out about him? Really, through YouTube. It was that long form podcast style interview he did with Joe Rogan, The Breakfast Club, things like that spread like wildfire. And if you can really just show that your main interest is making sure that people have what they need, I can't believe that they would turn around and say, hey, you know what? We're just going to automatically vote for the guy who's been in office for twice as long as we've been alive, instead of the guy who's like, you know what? I'm going to do whatever you need and take care of whatever you need to make sure that you actually see a path forward in life. And one of the greatest and worst things that I've experienced while running for office is the messages I get from, teenagers who are like, hey, your message really resonates with us. We want to be able to run for office because we feel so lost and like there's no path forward for us when we get out of high school. And I'm like, I'm glad that these people are getting civically engaged, but you should not have a child that feels like there is no path forward for them when their life is just starting.
Yep. I completely agree. And that's, the people running for office, we're trying to break down these barriers and try to figure out ways for people that come after us to do it better, more efficiently. And hopefully we got a lot of that today too. I mean, just the door knocking thing, we talked about this the other day. The amount of doors you have to knock to get not only talk to someone, but to get a yes, I'll vote for you, like a solid yes. It's pretty, it's probably a couple hundred doors.
You know what?
To one.
I went canvassing actually just the other day, Saturday and Monday. Saturday, I went, knocked on 75 doors, dropped off pamphlets, and this was me working with a whole different campaign. Because, like I said, I don't care who wins, so long as Hoyer gets out of office, I'll lend my support to anybody. 75 doors. I got one hard yes. I got one get off my lawn. And then I got 73 knocks with nothing.
Yep. So maybe the couple hundred doors was a little exaggerated. So maybe 1% to 3%, would you say? And that's just my experience with
time efficient. Time efficient. There's no good return on investment there.
Right. Exactly. And that's one of the things in political campaigns that for some reason, people spend a lot of time and money doing. And I'm hoping that, the Yang looks at this moving forward, because we spend a lot of time and money knocking doors in Iowa and New Hampshire. And I think the results are there. And again, I'm not trying to talk smack. I'm literally just saying, hey, let's learn from our mistakes moving forward, just because my background's in sales. So I've done my fair share of door knocking. And I can tell you that if you're trying to engage people on a wide scale, like, that is not the way to do it. Same thing with phone banking. I feel like phone banking is a little more efficient. I think, again, like you said, you could set up YouTube channels, podcasts, things that people can listen to. And if they want to be engaged with you, cool. If not, it's also fine. But we need to be smarter about the way we're attacking it, because right now the people with money are winning, because Just the way everybody's looking at it is like, hey, just who has the most money, not necessarily who's going to be the best candidate. We need to look at who's going to do the most for our people and who's actually going to care about our people. And that's how we adjust these things moving forward, right? We need to put people first. We need to put the people that we need to put the less fortunate first. We need to give them the benefits before the rich corporations or anything like that. And again, nothing against, you know, business and earning your way in businesses in general, but when you have a company like Amazon that has $11 billion of profit in 2018 and pays zero in taxes, there's an issue. When you have Netflix where their monthly plan to get videos is 10 or $11 a month, and that's more than they paid in taxes, there's an issue there. So all we're saying is like, hey, we need a paradigm shift where we are giving the advantages to the people and then from there to the rich businesses, because long term, the businesses will benefit anyway because they're going to have more business because people actually have money to spend on stuff. Mm-hmm. Right now, it's going to get to the point where there's enough people that don't have money to spend on stuff that parts of the economy are going to collapse. And I think we're seeing that in some places. So literally what we're saying is, hey, this is a way to fix it. This is a paradigm shift. If we don't do it now, then it's going to be a lot more catastrophic to do in the future. So,
yeah, absolutely. And you know what? There's a point that I just thought about that I want to bring up because you mentioned it. Speaking of, people not having enough income to really spend money in businesses.
Right.
I was an assistant manager at Toys R Us right before it went out of business, right before they went bankrupt. Wow. And here's the numbers that no one really likes to talk about. 30,000 of my closest coworkers in the United States all lost their jobs when Toys R Us went out of business. And there was like no plan in place for us. It was insane. And it all happened because of the poor decision making of 10 to 15 people at the top, the board of directors, the CEO. I remember being on a company-wide conference call when they announced the bankruptcy. And let me tell you what, I couldn't tell if I was heartbroken and upset or if I was livid because I only worked at Toys R Us for 9 months. I was basically a new hire. And I was like, I can't believe I wasted my time at this shit company. And they just went out of business like this. It was insane. And, that was just the personal feeling of it. But you know what? I really got rocked to my core because I ended up being an acting store manager because you have to realize people were leaving left and right. They were jumping ship. Yep. And I actually had to talk to 20, 30-year veterans. And, they were coming to me. They'd come to my office and they'd be like, hey, what's going to happen to our retirement? What's going to happen to our benefits? And I had no answers for them. And I really, really turned around and got to see how horrible the situation was for them. And it broke my heart. It was just like insane to have to watch that happen from the inside, to watch that staple, that retail staple crumble from the inside out. It was ridiculous.
Yeah, I was trying to think. I saw something today where a company, and I can't remember which company it was, but the company is closing different offices of the company. They're laying off workers, but they also just paid the CEO $22 million a year. So, yes, completely agree on that. So, the last part of this, we have some lightning round questions. So these are just questions that we go through. You just answer them. You don't have to do long form. Also, I'm not going to time you or anything, but just 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 questions that we're going to roll through, and we'll do this every podcast. So we'll go through there, and then we'll wrap it up after that. Sound good?
Yep.
All right, Rashad. First question: what's your favorite ice cream?
Vanilla.
Oh.
Vanilla bean specifically.
Vanilla bean. I mean, do you put anything else on it or just straight vanilla bean?
So look, I usually take the vanilla bean ice cream. Also do regular vanilla, French vanilla. It doesn't really matter. Any subspecies of vanilla. Take it, put it in a bowl. Sometimes I'll put a little chocolate syrup on it. If I'm feeling really saucy, I'll put some bananas in there. But usually I just take a spoon and I spin the ever-living shit out of it until it's like soup, and then I basically eat it like that.
That's awesome. I do that. I mean, yeah, vanilla ice cream, I try to put stuff in it. It's good either way, but just that's why I asked. All right, name someone that you consider a role model.
Ooh, let's come back to that one. Can I get a
Come back.
pass on?
Sure. I'll make that a thing. A pass. Would you rather have more time or more money?
Ooh, time.
Time for sure.
Yeah.
What is a book you would recommend and why?
The Overlord light novels. So Overlord is actually a great anime series.
Really?
Uh, it's a it's an isekai, which is basically another world series. It was a really popular anime in 2018, 19, and I think maybe 17. And I really got into the light novel series, and it just expands on it so much. You know, when you do a video of anything, whether it's a book that's translated into a movie, you always lose a bunch of the great world building in it, and it just fills in all the pieces. I love it to death.
Really? That's awesome. Have you thought about a role model yet?
No.
See, one reason I put some of these questions in there is just so people like, because you have to. It's a important question. Like, who can I look to for like as a good example? Just as an example of someone I would like to strive to be by. To be like, not be by, be like. So it's something, and that's actually a tactic in the book. Have you read the book Think and Grow Rich?
I have not.
Ooh, okay. That one you have to get. But one of the things he when you're trying to make decisions, when you're trying to game plan things like that, you have like 4 or 5 different people in mind, and you kind of just look at it from their perspective. So he just says, like, put this group together, and they're kind of your, would be your advisors, when you're thinking about things mentally. So you're not just arguing with yourself all the time. You're looking at, okay, from this point of view, like, you know what I mean? Does that make more sense?
Yes. So you know what? Now that you mention it like that, I don't want to give him the title of role model because it's too much of an accolade. But there are 2 people that I can think of throughout history where I just love reading their works, and I really like taking their insight and taking bits and pieces of it and modeling my own thought process and behavior after it. And one would be the Roman general Marcus Aurelius. The second one would be Niccolo Machiavelli. I loved the Meditations of Marcus Aurelius, and I loved both The Prince and The Art of War by Machiavelli.
See,
great reads.
You got them. So have you studied Stoicism at all?
Say one more time.
Stoicism?
No, I haven't.
That's something you have to look up. That's a lot of Marcus Aurelius goes along with Stoicism. It's Stoicism. So I'll send that to you later. But that's something too. If you're interested in Marcus Aurelius, then Stoicism would be a very good thing to study. So, all right. Last question. Might take you a minute to think about it too. Who is someone that you would nominate to come on the podcast?
Andrew Davis. On Twitter, he goes by Hubersaurus Rex, I believe. He is a really interesting person to talk to, mostly because he is a conservative voice, but he is a real conservative, the type that still enjoys proper discourse, that still understands the power between having a good conversations and finding middle ground. I was actually just talking to him the other day, and I had a fantastic time. And a lot of people turn around, and because of Trumpism, whenever they see conservative, they automatically think, no, I can't talk to that person. Their views are wildly different from mine. But you have to understand, at the end of the day, we're all just people.
Right.
We can find middle ground on basically every issue if we continue to practice actual civil discourse.
Awesome. That's yeah. We need to get back to that place. So can you say his name one more time?
Andrew Davis, and you can find him at Hubersaurus Rex, I think is his Twitter handle.
Okay, I'm gonna have you send that to me. So awesome. So that is the lightning round. You did awesome. Again, great conversation. Let our audience know where they can follow and support you.
Okay, so most of my social engagements I do online would be at on Twitter. You can find my handle. It's Rashad Lloyd for Congress, MD-5. The at is at ANBUJR 010. And other than that, I have a website that's being built.
Awesome.
Definitely check out the podcast Twitter. It's at Pivot into Politics. Is being built right now. If you have it in you to help support the channel, hey, I would love it. There's a list of supplies that we still need. But you know what? Like I said, you'll actually see a tweet from that channel. I believe that the speed of the team is the speed of the leader. So I'm working with whatever equipment I have right now, even if the audio turns out to be garbage. I'm still going to launch that first episode with whoever I can get in here, because you know what? The message is too important to really wait any longer. So
yeah, I mean, audio sounds good. Right now, I've been listening this whole time. The audio sounds good, so that I don't think that will be a problem. So,
nice.
Thank you for coming on, Rashad. You are the first guest here. Again, my name is James Ellers. So, thank you all for listening. If you're listening at this point, you've listened to the entire thing. So, good job. So, we will talk to you all soon. And again, thank you, Rashad, for being on.
Thank you.